all about how to try to keep that from happening. And they discover people in Brazil, and they make alliances with them, and the story goes on from there. And like I said, I'm writing the sequel now that will it will involve the English, who are on a separate mission from England to go to the New World, and they will encounter these people. So anyway, are there any questions about anything?
Is that what really happened?
Some of it is true. They, in other
I
words,
was a bad history student, so
the history was that the Portuguese and Spanish did colonize the New World. Right, we knew that. Right,
Yeah.
1492 and all of that stuff. Before Columbus went, there was a couple of Portuguese explorers who went to South America, and they discovered Brazil and started that whole process. And then the Portuguese, who were really the initiators of the slave trade at first, they started buying people, stolen people from West Africa and shipping them across and using them, hundreds of them at a time. And then later on, the Spanish did the same thing. And then, of course, the English did that in the 1600s in North America. And that's how we ended up with all of our African-American folks in this country. So that part of it is true. And so basically the mission of these people is to try to prevent that from happening.
Go back in time. Yeah.
They go back in time right to about when it started to see if they can
Change it.
change it. And we'll see how it works.
It's
See
like-
how it works. We can buy the next book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wish we could do that.
No, that's try. That's
Well, that's what you do when you're reading. You kind of put yourself in
yeah.
there. Yeah.
You kind of think that history will hopefully correct itself to a certain extent. I mean, we see things getting better and worse at the same time. And there's two processes going on. Some of them are destructive, some are constructive, and we just have to hope and pray that the constructive process will overcome and correct things. So,
So what made you want to write this?
When I stopped working as a lawyer, the style of writing, legal writing, that I had to do as an appellate lawyer was very formulaic and not very creative at all. And when I retired, the first thing I wrote was kind of a memoir about growing up in Pittsburgh, except I changed it. I changed the story. It was about my brother's murder. My younger brother had been killed.
Yes.
Right. So that story, My Brother's Keeper, is parts of it are actually kind of the middle part dealing with his murder and what led to that murder. That
That was
pretty
real.
accurate. Yeah. But then the other stuff, I kind of added a bunch of other stuff to
A little embellishment.
Yeah, embellished. So that got me started, and I figured, well, let's sort of play around with that. And then I don't know how I got onto this thing about. I guess when I was in the Peace Corps, it kind of got me interested in, African cultures and stuff, and learning about slavery.
How long were you in Ethiopia?
2 years. So this Father Rodrigo, in the story, he was a parish priest in Mogadishu, Somalia, for 40 years. Now, Somalia back in those days, in the 1400s, the 1400s, it was a very cosmopolitan area. There were people from India, Persia, all over Africa. There were even some Europeans there. There were some Italians there, Greeks. So it wasn't the kind of totally fanatical Islamic place it is now. And it wasn't a failed state like it is now. It had a sultan, and the sultan kept control of everybody and made sure everybody was good to each other. And, they had a lot of money, and they had trade all over the Indian Ocean. They traded with India, they traded with China, the islands, and all of that. So Mogadishu, in those days, was a very cosmopolitan place. So this priest that I've invented was a parish priest there at a Catholic church. Now, of course, in those days, the Catholics' presence was extremely tiny, and I doubt there really church. There were probably a few missionaries there. The Jesuits had tried to convert the Ethiopians who were Christians, but they were Orthodox. The Ethiopian emperor didn't appreciate the Jesuits' attempts to do that, and so they kicked them out. And they ended up settling in the coast of East Africa, not in Ethiopia proper, because they were run out, basically run out of town. So they settled in Mogadishu and other places, but I don't think they ever really managed to get a congregation going. I think ultimately they went back to Europe. But in this story, Father Rodrigo does have a church. They have a congregation that's mostly Portuguese, and
The way you wanted it
yeah,
to be.
that's right. I
Make it the way you want.
I constructed history the way I thought it should.
Yeah. That's gotta be fun.
And everybody got along pretty well. When he retired, he went. He went back to Portugal, and there's a whole story about him going back to Portugal and discovering slavery that the Portuguese were doing, because slavery didn't exist in East Africa at that time. It was a West African thing that the Portuguese and Spanish and later the British were doing. So he was very motivated to try to put a stop to it. And he just happened to have this little thing, which
That's
Flamel. And about a week ago, I decided I'm going to write the autobiography of Nicholas Flamel, which has never been written. There have been other science fiction books with him as a character. They're all over the map. I mean, there's probably 15 or 20 of them where there's a whole series of Nicholas Flamel science fiction books, fantasies. And I read one of them. I thought, this is kind of I'm just going to write the guy's autobiography and tell
You're
his
just going to
true
research
story.
his life, and
I'm going to research his
that
life and
sounds
write his
great.
autobiography. There's not that much known about his real life. There's a lot of legends. Like, was he really an alchemist, or was he just a benefactor of good
So how do
causes?
you go about doing that then? If there's not a lot of information.
There are records that you have to access.
Research.
Yeah. Paris, France, and to a lesser extent Portugal have records of the church and records of other entities that, nobles, like the nobility, would keep records and stuff in the journals or whatever. So I have to go.
How
and
hard
start
is it to get those records?
I'm going to find out.
You will find
And then
out.
like family, if you can trace the family line. I mean,
Yeah.
did he have kids?
No, he was never. He was married to Perrine Flamel, and she passed away of cancer. I don't think they had any kids.
See if they had kids or siblings. How about siblings?
Oh,
It was
boy.
just a couple.
So that's going to be tough.